Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
Created in 1939 by artist Bob Kane and writer Bill Finger, Batman has gone through a wide range of redesigns across numerous adaptations. There's already a ton of videos going into the nitty-gritty detail of the Batsuit's history in the comics, so today we're sticking with my personal area of expertise, live-action movies. By following Batman's film adaptations through Hollywood history, we can track the evolution of the character's public image and the changing role of superheroes in general. Is Batman an action hero? Is he a noir detective? Is he a cartoon character for kids? Or is he a gothic avatar of childhood trauma? From Adam West's light-hearted spandex to Ben Affleck's bulky armour, Batman's costume tells us a lot about how this character has evolved and the filmmakers who chose to reinvent him. And yes, I also have some very serious thoughts on that period in the 90s when the Batsuit had visible nipples. Hi there, I'm Gavia Baker-Whitelaw and this is Behind the Seams, decoding the world of costume design.
Try fireman, less to take off.
The basic Batman formula has remained the same for 80 years. He's a masked vigilante, the alter ego of wealthy businessman Bruce Wayne, who lives in the crime-ridden Gotham City. But aside from this, filmmakers have a lot of creative leeway. Some focus on Batman's combat skills, while others portray him as a detective. Some view him as a troubled loner, while others surround him with teammates. There's also an ongoing debate over his moral code and whether Batman should have ethical qualms about killing his enemies. This all plays in to Batman's visual design. Of all the A-list superheroes, he offers the widest range of cinematic adaptations, reimagined by a series of filmmakers with fascinatingly distinct visual styles.
The hell are you supposed to be?
Batman's first screen adaptation was a film serial in 1943, a low-budget operation that looks hilariously clunky to modern eyes. It definitely didn't measure up to 1940s noir classics like The Maltese Falcon or swashbuckling adventure movies like The Mark of Zorro, another film about a masked vigilante. This early adaptation was cheap, disposable entertainment, with actor Lewis Wilson wearing a sagging jumpsuit and shapeless cowl. His costume neither acts as armour during fight scenes, nor illustrates the eye-catching style of the comics. The earliest superhero costumes were modelled after circus acrobats and strongmen, which explains the whole underpants over tights thing. Their colours were partly shaped by the availability of cheap ink in red, yellow and blue. These designs were meant to be simple and fun, appealing mostly to kids. A lot of early superhero outfits look ridiculous to modern eyes, something that was cleverly satirised in Watchmen. So the idea of a bat-themed crime fighter fits in with other classic heroes like The Flash and Captain Marvel. But while vintage Batman comics can be pretty silly, his costume lends itself well to dramatic shadows and looming vampiric imagery. The kind of aesthetic we saw in German expressionist films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in 1920. The earliest Batman comics explained that Bruce Wayne designed the Batsuit to strike fear into the hearts of criminals, which is why he looks more ominous than other vintage superheroes. Combining drama with practicality, his original costume includes a Batwing cape and a bulletproof vest. In Batman Begins, this idea evolved into Bruce Wayne harnessing his own childhood fear of bats to frighten other people, emphasizing his twisted relationship with his own emotions. The comic's noir-influenced origins also had a big impact on the 1990s Batman animated series. But from a practical standpoint, it's difficult to transfer this kind of stylized look to a live-action movie. In the 1940s, actors weren't expected to have the body of a superhero, and stretchy artificial fabrics were a relatively new invention, so it was hard to make a realistic version of a comic book costume. As a result, the 1940s Batman did not look remotely impressive. Neither did Adam West, although the 1966 movie and TV show were intentionally tongue-in-cheek. Adam West's Batman had expressive eyebrows painted onto his cowl, and Robin's outfit looks like a Halloween costume. There's no need for body armor here, because none of the danger is real.
If you're going to kill me, you might as well get it over with.
Well, it was a good plot while it lasted, huh?
Yes, Catwoman, one of your very best.
Where are we going?
Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie kicked off the modern era of dark, adult-oriented superhero films. He may actually be my favourite Batman director to date. Burton's two Batman films bear no resemblance to the bombastic tone of late 80s action cinema, sharing more in common with thrillers about organised crime, corporate feuds, and psychosexual power games. Like most Tim Burton movies, these films combine horror with absurd humour, with an obvious emphasis on stylised production design. Thematically speaking, the 1989 Batman leans into a more mature side of Bruce Wayne, introducing him as an eccentric businessman who clearly needs to be in therapy. The Joker starts off as a mobster who gets dropped into a vat of acid, sending him mad and propelling him into a clownish crime spree across Gotham.
Where does he get those wonderful toys?
Tim Burton was a perfect choice to combine the more fantastical elements of the Batman mythos with a more dangerous tone. We get a 1980s twist on noir crime drama in a surreal setting that helps us suspend our disbelief about the story's more absurd elements. Tim Burton's Gotham is full of stagey set pieces, garish colours, and looming shadows. His second film, Batman Returns, was even more gothic, introducing Michelle Pfeiffer's sympathetic yet menacing Catwoman, and Danny DeVito's comically disgusting Penguin.
You said you were going to scare the Ice Princess.
She looked pretty scared to me.
Costume designer Bob Ringwood worked on both movies, and he did an amazing job. In earlier adaptations, the main purpose of the Batsuit was branding. It disguised Bruce Wayne's identity and let everyone know that Batman was here. The only practical element was the utility belt. Tim Burton embraced the idea that Batman should look scary, and that his costume nominally acts as armour. This is also where Batman's all-black colour scheme arrives. Michael Keaton's Batsuit features detailed musculature and a tough rubber cowl. So tough that he could barely turn his head. At the same time though, that cowl doesn't really provide much protection. It has more in common with fetish wear than with the armour worn by later Batman stars like Christian Bale. Like the film itself, this costume neatly combined the silly and serious sides of Batman. In this adaptation, Batman can truly get injured and feel pain, so he can't just wear spandex tights. But since Tim Burton established Gotham as a theatrical, stylized setting, the Batsuit doesn't need to fit some imagined ideal of practicality. Over the next 30 years, Batman's costumes would lurch too far in one direction or the other, never maintaining the equilibrium that Tim Burton achieved between realism and fantasy.
Wait a minute.
What is that?
Some kind of body armor. He's human after all.
Take off the mask.
The next two films were Batman Forever in 1995, starring Val Kilmer, and the notoriously derided Batman and Robin in 1997, starring George Clooney. Directed by Joel Schumacher, these movies introduced a new aesthetic, with costumes resembling plastic action figures. Batman and Robin wear glossy, iridescent armour with pronounced muscles, often lit with neon lighting. Now, before we go any further, I just want to remind you that Michael Keaton's Batman also wore armour with exaggerated fake muscles, lovingly crafted from black rubber. But there were two crucial differences between the Burton and Schumacher eras.
Big black pat.
No more tricks, Edward.
Very well then.
First of all, Schumacher preferred a more colourful comedic tone, and secondly, his version of the Batsuit had visible nipples. In a word, Schumacher's Batman movies are camp. This was an intentional choice, combining 90s MTV sex appeal with the self-aware corniness of the 1960s TV series. The second of his two films, Batman and Robin, was purposefully ridiculous, featuring choreographed dance sequences, slapstick comedy, and puns.
You get the ice, I'll get the Iceman.
It wasn't meant to be serious. A lot of people hate these movies, highlighting the bat nipples as a key reason why this was an all-time low for the Batman franchise. To me, this feels like fans reacting strongly to two factors. They hate Schumacher's choice to make Batman silly and comedic.
This is why Superman works alone.
And they're disturbed by the idea of a tough male action hero being sexualized.
Black rubber.
Or rather, being sexualized in the wrong way. In Schumacher's own words, "I wanted a very sexy, very sensual, very body-hugging suit." Visually speaking, these two films treat Batman and Robin in a way we usually see for female characters, which makes a lot of viewers very uncomfortable. This includes the nipples, which were apparently a step too far after Michael Keaton's otherwise acceptable rubber fetish suit. Both costumes were designed by the same guy, Bob Ringwood. They have more in common with Michelangelo's David than with the armour worn by cops or soldiers. But instead of just admiring the strength of that body, the Joel Schumacher films suggest that it could be sexually desirable as well. And like I said, that makes some people very uncomfortable. Schumacher is also the only openly gay director to make a Batman film, which undoubtedly played into the backlash here. There's a long history of people interpreting a homoerotic subtext between Batman and Robin.
Hang out at a lot of biker bars, Bruce.
Embraced by queer audiences, mocked in mainstream pop culture, and criticised by homophobes. In fact, this was one of the key arguments made in the 1954 book Seduction of the Innocent, which railed against the supposedly negative influence of comic books on children. This book inflamed conservative paranoia about gay undertones in Batman, bondage subtext in Wonder Woman, which was, to be fair, pretty obvious, and the general popularity of violence, horror stories, and sexual content in comics. It became a key piece of evidence in a series of Senate hearings about juvenile delinquency in 1950s America. In turn, this led to the creation of the Comics Code Authority, which effectively censored American comics for several decades. The fear of Batman being gay has had a weirdly outsized impact on pop culture, and you may have noticed that in recent years, Robin is still absent from the live-action movies. Instead, Bruce Wayne is paired up with surrogate father figures like Alfred. In the Zack Snyder movies, Robin is actually dead, folded into Bruce Wayne's tragic backstory. This allows Batman to safely express an emotional attachment to Robin without the character ever appearing on screen. Meanwhile, the same film turns Batman's friendship with Superman into a violent rivalry. Anyway, in the case of the Joel Schumacher movies, a lot of people conflate the campy atmosphere and sexy costumes with the idea of a gay Batman. But in my view, these aren't entirely the same thing. Aesthetically speaking, these films don't conform to Hollywood's macho image of action heroes. The costumes are colourful and theatrical, and instead of showing Batman achieve violent feats of strength, the camera lingers salaciously on his plastic muscles and prominent codpiece. However, in terms of the actual relationships on screen, there is arguably more sexual tension between the Riddler and Two-Face, than between Batman and Robin.
It's so you, and yet so you.
As for Schumacher himself, he stated outright that he never thought of Batman as gay. He believed that audiences were reacting to their own hopes or prejudices, including their expectations of his intentions as a gay filmmaker. Interestingly, when people do discuss this element of Schumacher's Batman, they focus more on the costumes than they do on the character's behaviour. This even includes the actors themselves. In a 2006 interview, George Clooney said, "I was in a rubber suit and I had rubber nipples. I could have played Batman straight, but I made him gay." So yes, the bat nipples are a lot more than just a punchline. They're a defining feature for these two movies, attracting widespread mockery and, in the end, leading Warner Brothers to go in a very different direction for Batman's next reboot. In 2005, Christopher Nolan revived the franchise with Batman Begins, kickstarting a new era of superhero movies, where DC and Marvel dominate the box office. The Dark Knight trilogy is gritty, violent, and takes itself very seriously, trying to create a quote-unquote realistic atmosphere while digging deep into Bruce Wayne's emotional issues. These films were critically acclaimed, but their obsession with realism has its pitfalls. Like most superheroes, Batman is an inherently fantastical character. Plenty of elements of his story are rooted in reality, like the presence of organised crime and police corruption, or the life-changing effects of childhood trauma. But as people love to point out,
What?
he's also a grown man who runs around dressed as a bat. There is a whole host of reasons why Batman wouldn't exist in real life, but Nolan's movies are very keen to ground him in reality, and therefore to be taken seriously as adult dramas. Batman is now for grown-ups. He's angsty, tough, and dangerous. Like James Bond, Batman's sense of humour was surgically removed in the mid-2000s, following the success of The Bourne Identity and a new wave of gritty action cinema. This led to a trilogy of films where Batman wears tactical armour and drives around in a hideous Batmobile that looks like a tank. There's a constant tension between the character's gothic fairy tale concept and Nolan's desire for a grounded tone. His love of sterile urban environments also meant that this was a rather boring era for Gotham City, which was previously a world of looming peril and cartoonish weirdness. Created by the acclaimed costume designer Lindy Hemming, Christian Bale's Batsuits are sleek and cool. He still resembles an action figure, but his cowl and armour benefit from more advanced costume building techniques. His cape is extraordinarily dark, adding another dimension of shadow to his appearance.
Notice anything? Regularly flexible, but put a current through it. Molecules realign, becomes rigid.
But overall, the prevailing theme here is practicality. That's why Christopher Nolan takes pains to show that Batman's cape is a functional glider, giving us a rational explanation for why he's wearing such a theatrical piece of clothing.
Oh, he had a great look. Oh, the cape and the boots.
No capes! No, go on. Your new suit will be finished before your next assignment.
As we all know from The Incredibles, capes are actually a horrible idea. This new Batsuit functions like real body armour, and all the gadgets look like dangerous weapons. This was the point where Batman turned into a true action star, coupled with Christian Bale's jacked physique. For more on this topic, check out my video on action hero costume design, which is linked at the end of this one. While earlier films barely discuss the practicalities of the Batsuit, the Dark Knight trilogy is riddled with conversations about Kevlar, titanium, graphite, memory fabric, and numerous high-tech gadgets. Batman Begins spends a lot of time on Bruce Wayne designing his costume, working from a survival suit that Wayne Enterprises manufactured for the US Army. Like the first Iron Man film, this ties into the post-9/11 trend for Hollywood blockbusters glorifying the military. The Dark Knight trilogy also leans heavily into 21st century surveillance culture and the rise of militarized policing in the United States. More so than the absurd or gothic tone of earlier films, we're invited to celebrate a billionaire who uses military-grade weapons to fight terrorists in a modern city. This sets the stage for Zack Snyder, another director with a very memorable aesthetic. Snyder worked with costume designer Michael Wilkinson on all of his DC movies, along with Watchmen, 300, and Sucker Punch. Wilkinson clearly understands Zack Snyder's vision, which in the case of costume design has a lot to do with Snyder's own self-image. In real life, Snyder is really into working out, like really into it. When he filmed 300, he joined his actors in their low-carb diet and extreme exercise regimen. Then in Justice League, we see Bruce Wayne doing the same kind of workout routine that Henry Cavill did to bulk up for Superman, and Snyder supposedly follows in real life as well. Instead of the more pragmatic, self-controlled martial arts training we see from Christian Bale's Batman, Ben Affleck follows a performative, boot camp-style routine where he hauls truck tires around his basement. It's very self-consciously aggressive, which fits Snyder's aesthetic to a T. This brings us to Ben Affleck's Batsuit. He had several over the course of his 2 films, and they all have one thing in common: bulk. While Christian Bale's costume is the most plausible for combat scenes, Snyder's may be the closest thing to a comic book accurate costume. That's because to him, the body and the clothes are one and the same. Ben Affleck's Batsuit simultaneously looks like tough, solid armor and like thin, skin-tight fabric molded directly onto Bruce Wayne's muscles and veins. Of course, no real fabric is ever as clingy as the costumes illustrated in superhero comics. And more to the point, we know Ben Affleck doesn't look like that. All of these muscles are padding, giving us a big, bulky Batman who almost looks like he's carved out of rock. One of his secondary costumes is even more extreme, featuring heavy-duty armor to fight Superman. It looks like it would be completely impossible to move in that outfit, but this doesn't really matter in Zack Snyder's heightened reality. Snyder likes to tell epic stories with exaggerated visual effects, zooming in on key moments of violence and pain. Unlike the repressed psychodrama of the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman v Superman has an operatic feel, with Bruce Wayne viewing Superman as an invading god who must be destroyed. Batman's emotional problems are amped up to an explosion of rage, matching Superman's uncharacteristically murderous role in Man of Steel. This is reflected in their bodies and costumes, where bulging, flexing muscles are even more obvious than in other superhero films. Snyder has a lot in common with a certain style of comic book art from the 90s, championed by Deadpool creator Rob Liefeld. Basically, he does not subscribe to the idea that less is more. In Batman v Superman, Batman shoots people and brands criminals with hot irons. He builds a reinforced suit of armor so he can beat Superman to a pulp, smashing him into walls, dragging him around with a rope, and stomping on his neck. I find this scene ugly and disturbing, with Snyder displaying an almost sexual fascination with Batman and Superman's rage and agony. But while I don't agree with what he's doing, the costumes really do enhance Snyder's vision. Superman, who we know is invulnerable, really does look like a god when we see him withstand a violent beating while wearing nothing but a spandex catsuit. Meanwhile, the middle-aged Bruce Wayne looks like he's encased in concrete, lumbering around with only his mouth exposed to the world, snarling as he tries to destroy his opponent. He's made a massive effort to transform himself into Superman's physical equal, and in the process, he's shut himself off from the outside world, rejecting any attempt at peaceful resolution. It's definitely the most brutal depiction of Bruce Wayne on film. As with previous reboots, we can expect the next Batman movie to change direction in response to earlier films. Directed by Matt Reeves, The Batman stars Robert Pattinson and is due to come out in 2022. We don't have much to work with yet, but it looks like they'll return to the sleek, armoured look of the Christopher Nolan era. Bruce Wayne, however, may be a fresher take. The trailer's most memorable image is Robert Pattinson with wild hair and eyeliner smeared around his eyes. Batman does wear eye makeup in previous films, hiding the pale skin that appears behind the eye holes of the cowl. However, when he takes off the cowl, the makeup disappears. Earlier filmmakers didn't want to depict Bruce Wayne with smoky eyes because it didn't gel with his action hero image. But this film finally acknowledges it, suggesting a few things about Pattinson's role. He embraces his gothic side, he has more in common with Gotham's theatrical villains, and his appearance is less constrained by conservative expectations for a male action hero. This is all speculation right now, but it does tie in with Robert Pattinson's eccentric public image and the kind of roles he likes to take elsewhere. I'm certainly interested to see how this film pans out. Each era of Batman has offered a bold new look, catering to different tastes and cultural trends. I suspect that Warner Brothers is too paranoid about a Schumacher-style backlash to try anything too daring, but I do hope that Robert Pattinson's inherent weirdness finds a way to shine through. Thanks so much for watching Behind the Scenes. What's your favourite Batman movie? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you'll never miss a future episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.